Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Venice, California. I'm Krista, and we are the Sixth Sense Society. Welcome to another episode of the Sixth Sense Society. We are so happy to have on board tonight Rick McCallum, who has been a stuntman and stunt coordinator for over 37 years, but more importantly, a ghost hunter since he was quite young. You said 13?
Long time ago.
Long time ago. So we're going to be talking to him about all things ghost and ghost hunting in just a few minutes. But first, we'll go over a quick cosmic weather report. And also, Kristen could not make it tonight. We're going to miss you, Kristen, and I hope you're having a great event. So we'll see you next week. So tonight we have a waxing crescent moon in the sign of Taurus. And Thursday on the 14th, we have our first quarter moon in 23 degrees of Gemini, 33 minutes at 3:27 a.m. And those of you who like to practice magic, however, it goes void of course until 5:31 a.m. until 2:49 p.m. when it goes into the sign of Cancer. So you really want to wait until that time if you are practicing magic with the first quarter moon. So that's it for our cosmic weather report. Not a whole lot going on this week. Plus we have our guest that we're really excited to talk to. Mike, you had a few things you wanted to mention about shows coming up.
Yeah, we've got some really great shows coming up. I hope you guys are all looking forward to it, and I hope we're getting great subscribers and we're getting great feedback and comments on our shows. So thank you to all of you that are writing in. We're going to make this real quick because I want to spend as much time talking to Rick as possible. And we were just having lunch across the street, and unfortunately, you guys missed it. There were some great ghost stories. So I hope that someday, if you ever get the chance to hang out with Rick, I highly recommend it. It's one of the most entertaining things you can do, as I'm sure you'll find out soon. A couple of things coming up next week. We have author Mabel Rodriguez, Lit, Entering the Darkness to Find the Light. She's got an amazing story. She's a healer. She was a nurse. She had some serious issues when she was young, and she overcame them, and a lot of amazing stories to tell. So I think you'll find her very inspirational. And then the following week, my good friend Justin from the Lodge here, who is a practicing hypnotist, and he's going to talk about hypnotism and mind control. And he's very into all of that, especially on a societal level. So it should be a very fascinating show. But I don't want to take up too much time tonight because I want to get right into the ghost hunt. And unfortunately, you guys can't be here because we're going to ghost hunt our lodge. And we've already been off to a good start. It took Rick 20 seconds to find his first ghost here at the building. So we're off to a real good start tonight. So take it away, guys.
Thank you so much, Michael. So welcome again. And you have been a stuntman, and is it mostly the horror business, movies that you've done, or all kinds of stunt work?
Well, I've done a lot of different kinds of movies, but my best friend is a man named Kane Hodder, who is better known for playing Jason in the Friday the 13th. And we've done 28 horror movies together, and I've done probably about 40 to 50 horror movies, but I've also been lucky enough to work with Clint Eastwood and other people like that. So
yeah, you've been like a stunt double to like Chris Noth and some of the other. Let's see who else I have. Greg Evigan, Daniel Baldwin.
Yeah, Greg Evigan was BJ and the Bear, and he was also on a TV show called P.S. I Love You. And I doubled him on a movie called Deep Star 6, which was an underwater horror movie.
Oh, that sounds cool. I don't think I've seen that one.
Not if you're in the monster suit.
Probably not.
Underwater, it's dark under there. It's cold. Not a lot of fun.
So you co-founded Hollywood Ghost Hunters with, in what year was it with Kane?
I don't know what year it was. It's been about 10 years ago. We were at Mansfield Reformatory in Ohio, and we were doing a movie there, and we had pretty much the run of the place. And we were way, way back, like 2 in the morning. Our scenes were done, so what we were doing, we were way, way in the back. And if you've ever seen Mansfield Reformatory on TV, all the cells are rusting. There's no lights, just the moonlight coming in from outside. And it's the reason they do a lot of horror movies there. It's perfect. Well, we're walking back, and Kane says to me, he goes, hey, why don't we ghost hunt? Well, I've been ghost hunting since I was 13, and I never tell anybody, right? And all of a sudden, you know, my best friend says he wants to ghost hunt. I'm like, well, this could be cool, right? So a couple things, weird things happened. I went up on the second tier, and he was on the first one. We were walking along, and I was compelled to go in this one room. And I'm in there, and I said, Kane, I said, it feels like someone's crushing my chest. And he goes, well, mark it. We'll have some other people come. So I'm looking around. I don't have anything to mark it with. And I look up, and there's a Sharpie. There's an X above the door in black Sharpie. So I go to the next one. I look, and it's not on any of the other places. So it's okay. I can remember that. So the second thing that happened, we go downstairs. We're walking along, and it's probably 100 yards to the far end of the cell blocks. And I look up, and I see a shadow person. And I'm looking, and I wonder if Kane sees it. And I turn around to look, and he's gone. And I thought, oh, great! Even the scary Jason guy runs away. This is wonderful. I'll never find anybody to start a group with. And then as I'm turning my head back around, I hear, and I look, and he's running down the hallway towards it. He'd gone behind me the other way, so I took off running with him. And when we got down there, it was gone. But I said, okay, this is the guy that I'm going to start a ghost hunting group with, because everybody else, you go ghost hunting, there's a noise, and they all go creeping backwards. It looks like Michael Jackson moonwalking. Everybody starts going backwards, right? Not our group. Matter of fact, the tagline on our group is, if you run, you're done. We'll throw you out.
Well, I even liked underneath on the website, horror film professional stalking the supernatural. You know, it does sound kind of more superhero-ish like.
Well, we are superheroes. At least we play them in the movies.
Yeah, I think I'd be one of those. I don't know. I have like a kind of squeamish side, but I always want to go into the danger too. So I don't know. I've done both. But I don't think I would run from it. I might, be a little timid to begin with.
Well, anybody that says they're not startled by something that pops in front of them is lying. It's a human reaction. Everybody gets startled.
Yes.
It's what happens after you get startled.
Good point.
Okay? Because
Yes.
I've seen big, strong men go, ah, and just take off running.
Mm-hmm.
I saw one guy that was actually at this studio. I was ghost hunting with a girl, and we had seen some shadows, and we were getting readings off the K2 meter, and we were hearing voices. And he comes up and he goes, I don't believe in this stuff. I said, well, we just heard a voice a minute ago. And he goes, I don't believe in it, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden we heard the voice, and the K2 meter went all 5 lights. And he goes, damn! And he turns around and he ran. You could hear him running down the stairs. So that was pretty funny.
So I was kind of curious, at the dinner time you talked about starting when you were 13. Is there an incident that started you out wanting to ghost hunt? Did something happen, or?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. My grandfather had gotten killed by accident. He was a security guard and cleaning the gun. He killed himself. So we had to take him to Paducah, Kentucky from Chicago, because that's where he wanted to be buried. And we went by train. And my mom at the time did not have a lot of money. So this was money out of pocket. And, we were kind of going on a real tight budget. So we wanted to stay somewhere that was close, to the cemetery. So there was this one place, and we went into it, and it was kind of beat up looking. And we went in there, and the guy goes, I've only got one room left, and I have to tell you, it's haunted. Well, I'm 13 years old. I mean, this is like getting a golden ticket to Disneyland. Haunted, yes. Ooh, yeah, we'll take it. And my mother's like, wait, but yes, we're going, yeah. So anyway, we go in there, and it's this room, and it's like 20 by 20. It had a wooden floor. It looked almost like a volleyball court. Mm-hmm. And it had 2 roll-away beds, one on each wall. So we had a good distance between the two of us. Well, she's sleeping over there. I'm sleeping on this side. In the middle of the night, I hear her scream. And I pop awake, and I look, and I see her bed is rolling towards the middle of the room.
Oh, wow.
And all of a sudden, I realize my bed is going the other direction. And we smacked into each other in the middle.
Whoa.
Right? And a little freaked out, right? But still excited, right? My mother's like, she looks at me and she goes, I guess the guy is right, right? So even back then, this is before the K2 meters and everything else, you have to debunk stuff, to find out if something's there. And my mother was a member of Mensa, so she was pretty smart. So we started figuring maybe a truck had gone by, and vibrations had caused the beds to roll. So we took the beds back and we pushed them. and I couldn't get it to go like more than 2 feet. When I shoved it, it wouldn't keep going, right? So then we got a glass, and we set it on its side to see if the floors were warped. Wouldn't go anywhere when you tried to roll it. So the floors weren't warped. We couldn't push it. Something else happened. So since that day, I was like, something else is going on here. I'm in.
That's cool that your mother was into it too, though. That she wanted to explore the possible reasons instead of just maybe dismissing it or.
Well, what's funny is that I'd gone off and started to get where people would know who I was from ghost hunting and things like that, and she got really sick, and I was taking care of her before she passed away, and she told me one time she's sitting there and she goes, "He's back," and I said, "Who's back?" Right? And she would sit in the recliner, and she could see all the way down the hallway to the back door. She goes, "The Indian." And I'm like, she's sick and she's on drugs, so I'm figuring she's hallucinating. I said, "You see an Indian down there?" And she goes, "Yeah, he's down there a lot." And I said, "You saw something down there. Why don't you holler to me or something, in case it's really somebody down there?"
Right.
And she goes, "No, he's been there for a long time." She goes, "I think he watches out for me."
Oh.
And I said, "Really? You see that?" She goes, and she looks at me, she kind of smiles. She goes, "I've seen things all my life."
Wow.
So maybe it runs in the family.
I do think some of that is hereditary. My mother was raised Catholic, and she's very scientific minded. So she would refuse to acknowledge how psychic she was. But every now and then she would drop a bomb. I lost my brother when I was a teenager, and she'd say, I saw David. And that's the only time she would say it. But she'd just do it very matter of fact. And she also had these incredibly psychic dreams. She had one when Nixon was elected. And so maybe some of that can be sort of passed through the bloodline.
I think so. And I had another thing happen now that you mentioned that was, I don't think I've ever told this on camera before. My mother and grandmother lived in one room, and I lived in another room. And I was maybe 16 years old. And I had a dream, and all I saw in the dream was my mother laying on the bed and a .45 gun come into frame. And I just woke up, and I was just sitting there going, "Oh, man." And all of a sudden, I hear my mother scream in the other room. So I just go taking off, and there's a dog gate there. I just ran right through the dog gate, broke it, went in, opened up the door, and she's sitting up. And I said, "What's the matter?" She goes, "Oh, I had a terrible dream." She says, "Somebody aimed a .45 at me while I was sleeping." And I went,
"Wow.
I just had..."
That's wild. Same dream.
Yeah, we had the exact same dream at the same time. Well, mine seemed to be a little bit before hers, but...
Right.
The fact that we were both...
Right. You're definitely in sync with each other.
The question is, were we picking up on somebody's intention?
Casey believed that a lot of things were foreshadowed in the dreams that you could change. And I've read a lot of stories where people would believe that and they would change the outcome.
Yeah.
So I think it's quite likely that's possible. Maybe just acknowledging it can make a person more aware, or who knows.
Yeah, that was one thing, and I really haven't talked about that, but it was so strange.
Wow.
It was so strange, but I've had a connection with my parents on different levels like that. Mm-hmm. If you don't mind me telling a quick story.
No, go right ahead.
My dad and I did not get along very well for quite a while. And he finally called me up and said, "Listen, we got to straighten this out." But before this had happened... I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4", 250 pounds, and I've got arms like a freaking baboon, right? I need a pillow to hug when I'm sleeping. Otherwise, my arms get all tied up and they're asleep, and I can't get up, and, it's an ugly scene. So my mother was going to the swap meet, and I asked her, I said, "Ma, can you pick me up a pillow? Just something I can hug on." Well, I don't know what possessed my mother. She got me a round red satin pillow. I mean, look at me. Do I look like a round red satin pillow guy? No, not even a little bit. But anyway, it was a good hugging pillow, so I was grateful for it. But right after she got it for me, I was laying there sleeping, face down, and I woke up like that. I mean, completely awake, but I didn't move because every danger bell that a person has was going off. Now, my room in Chicago used to be the toy room for my cousins when they owned the building. When I laid flat, my feet would touch one wall and I could reach out and touch the other. Mm-hmm. And when I would stand up, I could go like this and touch the walls to the side. It was very small. So there was just the room for my bed, and I had a little small dresser, and then I'd have to wiggle out. Well, I woke up like this one night, absolutely positive there was somebody next to my bed looking at me. Now, I've got one of those sliding doors, and you can't get in without me hearing you, and the dog wouldn't have let you in, so I'm frozen because I think a burglar somehow has gotten in, and if I move, he's going to kill me. I mean, that's, what else do you think? There's somebody standing next to my bed, right? And then it went away. And it actually happened again about 3 or 4 times in the next couple of weeks. After that, my dad called and asked me to come down and visit. So I thought, all right, he's making an effort, so I'll go do it. So I grabbed a friend of mine because it's 1,200 miles, and I figured, we'll have somebody to talk to on the way. So we drive down there, and I get down there, and this place, by the way, his house was the most haunted place I've ever been.
Wow.
I mean, unquestionably, I'm writing a book about it. It is by far the most haunted place I've ever been. And it started that night instantly from the time I got there and didn't stop. But we were sitting there talking, and my dad said, I felt kind of bad that you and I were not communicating. And I had told my friend Tom, who went with me, about the things by my bed and how it was terrifying to wake up and think somebody was standing next to you. And my dad says, yeah, he says, I started having these dreams where I was standing in your bedroom looking down at you sleeping.
Oh, wow.
And I looked over at Tom. I didn't say a word. And he looked at me as soon as he heard it because we were talking about it on the way down to Texas. And my dad had never been to my room, and we hadn't ever talked for years. So I just looked over at him, and part of the debunker in me, I said, what's my bedroom look like? And he goes, I don't even know how you get in it. He says, your bed is so big. He says, it's so small. He says, I don't even know how you get in there. I said, is there anything else in there? And he goes, yeah. He says, I see you hugging a small, round, red satin pillow.
What? Oh my
There's
God.
no way somebody can come up with that off the top of their heads.
That's too specific.
I mean, after that, I was like, wow, okay.
That's pretty amazing.
So between my mom and dad, who did not like each other, both of them, I had experiences with both of them. So who knows?
Do you have any siblings?
I have a half brother, and he actually was down there in the house in Texas, and a lot of stuff happened to him. A lot of stuff happened to my evil stepmother, Vandy, who I really like. That's why I call her my evil stepmother. She's actually the sweetest person you can ever live. She's so cute. I'll be out with her at a restaurant, and I'll be flirting with the waitress, and the waitress will be looking at me like, you dog, you're sitting with we're only 7 years apart. My dad was a cradle robber. But anyway, and she'll look and she'll go, that's my stepson. So she's like my wingman. She's always trying to help me out. So, but yeah, we had so many things happen in this house, and I just wrote in the book, and it's all the stories in there. But I called this chapter "The Dilemma," and I found out the phone number of the people that live there. Now it's an elderly African American family, and my dilemma is: do I call them and ask them if things are happening at their place? And if they're not scaring a couple elderly people, or do I just let it go? So far, I've just let it go.
Let it go.
Because, a lot of people feel different about spirits. A lot of them, that might really bother them to the point they want to move away or something. So I think it's best if I just, keep it to myself.
That's true. Some people probably would want to move, and others would be into it. You don't know unless you know them.
Yeah. And I'm not going to do that to an elderly couple.
Right, right. So when I was doing just a little nosing around about the history of ghost hunting, I came across the oldest known paranormal investigation research organization called the Ghost Club in London. It was formed in 1862. And it's still around, but it's gone through a lot of different changes. Initially, they didn't allow women in. But there were some interesting members. We had Dickens was member, Darwin, and Yeats. Of course, Yeats is always everywhere in the metaphysical world. Yeah. I assume you'd probably be familiar with it as far as maybe just hearing about it. Or...
I have heard of it, and I've heard that there were other members as well, and I'm trying to remember who else it was. I believe that the guy who wrote Sherlock Holmes is also a member.
Yes, Arthur Conan Doyle.
Yeah,
yes.
Arthur Conan Doyle was... Arthur Conan Doyle, a lot of people don't know, was absolutely obsessed with the paranormal.
Yes.
And he was one of the big pioneers of it, and actually was one of the first people that got defrauded, shall we say. I don't know if that's the right word for it. He got taken. Let's just put it that way. By some people that claimed they had pictures of fairies.
Oh, I remember that vaguely. Yes.
So that he kind of got bamboozled there, but he was one of the first real pioneers of it, and he really pushed it. But there's all through history, some of the people, Da Vinci and some of the real famous people were very much into the paranormal.
Well, it's interesting too, like someone like Da Vinci, because he was very scientific. And one of the things about certain scientists is they poo-poo all of the meters indicating that they're spirits, and they don't, I mean, they just poo-poo it, they dismiss it. They don't say, hey, let's look into it, let's check it out. And yet there have been luminaries that have been very interested in the paranormal even. So what is this certain scientific world that just refuses, no matter what, to investigate even to
Well, you got to remember, scientists are cold hard facts that you can put down on paper, that you can hand them something. You can't do that with a spirit. You can show effects of a spirit being around you. You can see things like the things I showed you earlier, the things I have on tape, and say, wow, that's interesting. That may be a spirit. Might not be, but it looks to be a spirit when you see it. Things on the K2 meter. Now, there's people that say, well, your phone can make that go off and this and that. Well, when you're standing there, and I'll give you a for instance, I was on Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh, Scotland. It's a mountain where they say King Arthur used to be. But if you go to Europe, every mountain King Arthur used to be on. Just like George Washington slept in every single hotel. But we were in this 1400s, 14th century chapel that was a ruin. And there's no electricity on this mountain. Nothing. There's nobody around. We're up here by ourselves and got some of the best K2 meter things you'll ever see. So
how did that start with the K2 meter? Who was the first person to start using it or something like that? I don't know the origins of the use of it.
I'm not exactly sure myself, but I'm sure that it probably came around by accident, would be my guess. I would imagine, because a lot of electricians use those to find wires and things like that. And I'm sure that sometime they were standing there and all of a sudden it started going off. And they're like, what's causing this?
Right.
Now there's other things that I've been able to figure out. Microwaves, we'll turn them on. Being too close to a power source will turn them on. But generally when you're near a power source, a lot of the people out there will know this, there'll be solid lights instead of flashing. Okay, but electromagnetic will come back as a flashing light. Okay, so when you get the flashing lights, that's more what you're looking for. Okay, and if you get a steady light, that's not paranormal in my opinion. It's got to be the flashing lights, and it's that would be more along the lines. But when you're using a K2 meter, a lot of people do it all the same way. I have my own technique, and I was showing Michael earlier that I test them as I'm doing it. Like I showed him a thing there where I went down, I said, are you back? And it goes all 5 lights and it's going crazy. And I said, go back to 1. And it instantly goes back to 1, right? And if you can get them where they will turn it down as well as go up, then it's more interesting. You're getting a different kind of communication. But I was sitting there, I said, okay, so there are more people here with you. And Michael saw it. And I said, are there 2? And it goes all 5 lights. Then I went 3, 4, 5, 2, and when I went 2, went all 5 lights again. So what I tried to do is I tried to trick it a little bit to see if it would go off again on the other numbers.
Sure.
And it didn't until I came back around to the original number. That to me gives it a little more value. So just one of the things I do, and I try and make it to go back down. If it will listen to me doing that, then I figure that maybe I am actually speaking to a spirit or interacting with one. So,
what have been some of your favorite places and locations to ghost hunt at?
Oh man, there's so many. One we were talking about earlier, David Oman's house.
Yes.
David's a friend of mine. I'll be honest with you. I like David. He's a lunatic, but he's a good lunatic. Actually, a really nice man. And I've been up there many, many, many times, and not one single time have I been disappointed.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of activity when we were up there too, and I think it's becoming famous for it, to tell you the truth.
One of my friends was actually laughing at me, something that happened when we were there. We were downstairs in the basement room, and he on the outside of it, he's got these cement stairs that are actually the slabs. It's not all poured cement, it's the slabs. So you can see through the stairs. And we went out there. We heard real loud steps. So me and my one guy go out there, and he goes down the steps, and I'm standing on the landing by the door. And it's wintry kind of outside, so the stairs are covered with leaves. And I'm waiting for my friend to come back up, and I hear behind me, starting at the top of the stairs, crunch, 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 coming down the stairs.
Wow.
So I'm just standing there. I turn around, and it comes all the way down, and it stops like the one or two above me. It just stops. And my friend had come up, and he was watching what was going on. And I'm just standing there looking, and a second later, I just went, hi. Right. And he busted out laughing. I said, well, what else am I supposed to say? You know, but it's David Oman's is a very, very good place. Some of the places, I go to Scotland every year for a month. And I ghost hunt Roslin Chapel and Balgony Castle and Hales Castle. And actually, 2 weeks from now, all you ghost hunting people, you cry your eyes out. My friends Scottish Paranormal are taking me to Dublin, and then we're going on to the Hellfire Caves for a ghost hunt, and then on to Leap Castle, which is one of the most haunted places in the world, supposedly. So I'm really looking forward to that. So I did go to one place in Yorkshire, England, where I was not involved in what exactly happened. I was there split seconds after this happened, so I did not see it. But I trust the people that were there. They were lined up on an altar, which was actually grass. The altar had gone in this old place, in a place called Bolton Abbey. Now, there's no roof on the place, and it's all grass. It's well manicured. It's it's not like all overgrown and everything else. But they were standing there, and there was, there was a guy facing this way, a girl facing that way, a girl facing that way, and then three guys. And the guy that was leading it is a TV psychic, right? And he's telling everybody to kneel down. Well, the second girl kneels down, and her husband kneels down. And the girl in front, who was a soldier, says, I'm not kneeling down. And he goes, you kneel down, don't you defy me. And she goes, I'll rugby tackle you off this altar. Right? She was not a shrinking violet, right? And he said, don't defy me. And then I heard a scream, right? And then I was just around the corner, me and these two guys who were bouncers from Liverpool. We come running back around, and all I can say is chaos. I look, and there's my friend Brian is laying flat on his back, knocked out. The guy in front of him is down on his side, and everybody's on their knees except for the other two people, the girl and the guy. So I looked, I said, what happened? And they said, Brian's down, Brian's down. And we're like, what do you mean he's down, right? Well, he's out, right? So this one bouncer that was there, I said, go get him, because I do a lot of water safety and safety stuff on movies. I used to be a lifeguard. I said, go get him, right? I want to see what's wrong with him. So he jumps over Peter, his name was, jumps over this little fence about yay high, picks Brian up like a sack of wheat and runs him over and throws him over the fence to me and Chunk, who's the other bouncer, like 300-pound guy. We catch him, and we take him back, and he's sitting, and he's out, and he's leaning against Chunk. And I'm watching him, and all of a sudden I see him start to vibrate. Now, either he's going into shock or something's attaching to him, is the two things that I'm thinking. Well, most likely shock, because he was knocked out.
Right.
So I grab him and I pull him. I put him on the ground, and I say, get something to elevate his feet. So the girl brings her two equipment cases, and we put him on there, and I'm, trying to get him to wake up. And, I'm rubbing his extremities, trying to get some blood going, and he's still sitting there, and I took my coat off and I put it on him, and he's still shaking. So the other people in the groups took their coats off, and we just buried him under the coats. Probably about 20 minutes later, he finally came back. And there was another story that happened there. Just follow me on this if you can. There's a story that at Bolton Abbey, they will not let you out of the area if they want you to stay.
Oh.
And as we were going, this one girl who was with the English paranormal Anubis, she was walking, and all of a sudden her chain, she had a crucifix, I believe it was, got yanked up on her neck and left a burn mark on her neck.
Ooh.
And she just looked at me and she goes, I don't think I can go out the gate. Right? And I said, what do you mean? She goes, something doesn't want me to go out the gate. And I said, well, you better concentrate and get out of here. This is not a good thing.
Right.
So she, girls up and gets through. Well, next is the soldier girl who's not afraid of anything, right? And she stops and she goes, it doesn't want me to leave either, right? And I said, come on, do it. And she goes through. Well, I walk through it. Obviously, it doesn't like me. Get going.
Get out of there.
Beat it, buddy. But the next thing that came to me when we were I asked the people to go get the truck, get some hot chocolate or some coffee to warm him up now that he was awake. And Peter, one of the bouncer guys, has him under one arm. I've got him under the other, and we're half dragging him over to the exit. Now, all of a sudden, I'm about 15, 20 feet away from that fence, and he's got his head down. And I'm like, I wonder if he's going to react to this, right? Mm-hmm. And we get about 10 feet away, and he just snaps up, and he starts pushing backwards. Well, I looked over and I said, Peter, and we just picked him up off the ground and ran him through the fence. They opened up the door to the to the truck, and I picked him up and threw him into the truck and slammed the door, and they took off with him. So,
was he okay then?
Yeah, and then he said later on, he comes out and he goes, oh, I feel better. I'm going to go back down there now. And I looked at him and I said, if you think you're going down there, I'm going to knock your ass out and stick you in the trunk of the car, right? So that was the end of the evening. I said, you're not going back down there. Right.
So do you think he was somehow maybe vulnerable to something, like maybe someone is sensitive or there's a vulnerability?
No.
Random?
There was a backstory. There was a reason we went there. He had been there like 20 years earlier.
Oh.
And he had also found himself, he was standing at one spot and he woke up with somebody shaking him 30, 40 yards away.
Oh.
So, he wanted to go back and find out what was going on. So he went all around there and we were all watching him as he went by to see everything was fine. And then when they went to the altar, bam. So trust me, people, I realize it's a hard story to believe. I mean, I was there and it's hard for me to believe, but I trust these people. So, I mean, it happened. And how to explain it, I have no idea. Something happened. But I didn't tell you the rest of the story. When I asked the people what happened, and I had hold of them corralled because, not that I was keeping them there, they were all around Brian. So they weren't off telling stories to each other. And I wouldn't think they would do that anyway. And I asked them individually what happened. And I asked the soldier girl, I said, what happened? And she's the one who told me about tackling him like a rugby player and stuff like that. And she goes, and then when he said, don't defy me, what looked like a goat's head with no eyes flew from behind his face right at her. And she screamed, and that's what I heard when we went running around the corner. So I asked the next girl, I said, what happened? She goes, well, I heard her yell, and I looked up and I saw what looked like a goat's head with no eyes. Right? I'm like, wow. So I asked the next guy, and he says, well, I didn't see anything. I was already down. And the next guy, I said, do you see something? And the fact that he said something a little bit different gave it a little more value for me. He said, it looked like, a ram's head or something, but it didn't have any eyes.
Oh, my goodness.
This is pretty heavy stuff. And then when Brian was awake, I asked him what happened to him, and he goes, I don't know. He goes, I was here. Next thing I know, you were slapping me.
Wow.
So that was interesting. But other things actually happened to this place, Bolton Abbey in Yorkshire, England. The girl that's a soldier, I always wear black, and it was cold outside, I had a black coat on. And she comes around out of the Abbey, and she comes over, and I'm standing over there with the K2 meter doing something off the side. She goes, how long have you been standing here? It's 15 minutes or so. She goes, I just followed you out of the thing. She goes, you're right in front of me, a big black shape. And she went,
ooh.
Right? And while we were sitting there, the other girl comes up, the one who's actually a psychic. She comes up and she goes, I was down by the water and I saw this tall black shape come up and go past me. And then right after that, it would have been right where the other girl picked her up.
Amazing.
So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happened that night. Hard to explain, hard to believe, but, I was there. Like I said, I did not see the original thing that happened with the heads and stuff because I was right around the corner, but I saw people tumbling and
sure,
everything else. So, and if I didn't know the people, I wouldn't believe it. It's that simple. But I know them, and they're all above board. None of them would do that. And if one of them would do that, the other ones would jump them.
Right.
And they wouldn't get away with it. Trust me. So
Got to jump in and share a quick story along the same lines, and people that are above board, like you said, people that you know would never exaggerate. And I'll tell you the best story I have about that was a lady that I was friends with. She worked this little 7-Eleven in the back shift, midnight till 7 or whatever. And we'd become friends over the years, and she was a practical joker, and she was a lot of fun, and so we'd stop and chat in the evening. I worked night shift, so on the way home I'd stop and grab a beer or something, we'd chat. And so anyway, this had gone on for some time, and one time I guess she knew that we were getting into tarot cards and all these weird things, so I guess she figured we wouldn't judge her, but she knew that Christmas was coming up, and Krista and I had no real relatives in the city, so she invited us to go to her place for Christmas dinner. We accepted. When we got there was pictures of this teenage kid everywhere and candles. It turns out she'd had one son who was a teenager, was killed in a car accident, and she'd never mentioned it. In all the years that I knew her, didn't even know this, because she would never talk about it. So after she knew that I knew about her son, we were chatting a couple nights later, and she said, the strangest thing happened to me one time. I was standing here at the cash, and this car pulled up, and this guy got out with his long coat on, and he walked up to the door, and he reached for the handle, and he froze, and he just looked terrified. And standing inside the door as plain as day was my son and my father, and they looked at him, and he looked at them, and he walked back over to the car and got back in and said something to the guy driving, and they drove off, and my son waved at me, and they vanished in front of my eyes. And she said about an hour later, the cops came in looking for the guy who had a shotgun under his coat. He'd beat up the clerk up the street and robbed that store instead. And she started to cry when she told me the story. Now, the thing that makes me believe her is that's her sacred thing. And nobody jokes about your sacred thing. You would just never do that. It was so sacred to her son, that there's no way she would exaggerate or make that up. So I 100% believed her. And so I don't know if we get into spirit guides or angels or ghosts or what they are sometimes. But again, it's foolish to think that there isn't something, because I think that all of us have seen way too much to believe that there isn't something. So, but I thought that was just an amazing story.
That's a great story. And it's funny because I have quite a few people contact me because I have the Hollywood Ghost Hunter magazine and several Facebook sites, and I get tons of stories, and intervention is one that comes up quite a bit, and it's usually by a relative. I actually have had my dad intervene on my behalf on 2 different occasions.
Oh, really?
And he passed 24 years ago. One time I still don't know what it was. It's kind of creepy. I was sleeping and I heard a noise, and I looked up and I saw the back of my dad wrestling with somebody else that was trying to get past him to get what I guess to me, because I was in the bed and it was right here. And I could see him clear as a day, and I looked and gone. So I don't know what was trying to get to me, but I know my dad was trying like heck to keep it from getting there. And I saw that, and another time, it's a longer story, but he did it another time and actually saved my life. So
those stories are great because, unfortunately, I think what sells on television are, stories of scary things, and there seems to be different kinds of ghosts in life, or whether you call them a ghost. Do you call them a ghost and spirits? Are they different to you? Or are there?
Oh, yeah.
So what is a ghost to you versus a spirit or an entity? Or
well, it's funny that you ask that, because whenever I work at go to a paranormal convention and actually give a speech or something, that's one of the first things I ask. I said, does anybody realize that there's a difference between ghosts and spirits? And most of them know. And I said, a ghost is somebody who is trapped here. A spirit is your grandmother who went to the other side and comes back to you in a time of need. So there is a difference between a ghost and a spirit. Do I think spirits come back to help you? I certainly hope so, because that would mean my dad was in a good place. Ghosts, a lot of them, I think, and this is just my take on it, they don't know they've died. And the other ones, I think, that do know they've died don't want to take the walk.
They don't want to go.
They don't want to take
for whatever
the walk.
reason.
Just, jumping in on that again real quickly, I totally agree with Rick. And one of the things I've noticed doing readings, and people ask about people that have passed away, and I think that there's sort of an awkward transition time. And I've said that it's no different going from a physical body to a non-physical world as it is coming the other direction. If you look at a newborn baby, it doesn't quite know how to make the head work right, and the arms don't work right, but in a short time it figures it out, and so forth. But I think if a person knew that they were going to die, if they were elderly, if they had a serious illness where they recognized that, I really think that transition is a lot shorter. I think when people don't know, when it happens unexpectedly, so the boiler blows up next to you and you had no idea it was coming, I think that bewilderment, that confusion over what happened, I think creates a much longer transition period, and maybe that's why they hang around. And then, of course, in a non-physical world, there's no time. So to them, 10 minutes could be 1,000 years in our time, and so I think maybe that's a big, big part of it. So,
well, I think you're right on that. I really do. Both my parents died of cancer, and they both actually suffered quite a while at home for about 4 months. My stepmother and I took care of my dad, and then I took care of my mom. And the hospice people came in. And, if you don't believe in angels, you will after you meet the hospice people.
Oh, I bet.
I mean, they are the most awesome people you'll ever meet. But they will tell you while the person is sick, they will tell you what's going to happen. And they will tell you they're going to see loved ones before they pass. And they say the ones that they're closest to, they'll shut out. And I asked them, I said, why is that? They said, because they figure the ones that are closest to them already know everything about them. And now they're trying to, finalize everything with the other people. So
there's a great book. I cannot remember the name, but it's basically collected stories of that happening when people are dying in hospitals and hospices, and someone's collected it all. And my grandmother died of cancer too, a little slowly. And about 2 weeks before, she started looking into the corner and calling out her sister Lily, who I didn't even know that well. And you could see she was looking at her, and she said, Lily, Lily. She had a Hungarian accent, and I remember that distinctly. And she did it more than once until she finally passed. But it was, and she would start talking a little to the person. I guess that is so common.
It's universal.
Yeah,
it really is. I mean, my dad kept seeing his brother Don. My mother didn't really say anything about seeing anybody else, but I could see that something else was going on. So my mother was, very outgoing and stuff, but she played her cards real close to the vest. Just like I never knew that she had seen ghosts her whole life. And she just smiled at me. She goes, that's something I've seen in my whole life.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's more out there than anybody can even remotely begin to conceptualize.
There was something I was watching the footage on David Oman's house that you have on your website, and there was something interesting that came up as theoretical possibility of this idea of a collective spirit when spirits have been, I guess maybe, is it trauma together, or they've been there together, and this one fellow thought there was like a collective spirit instead of individual spirits there.
That was Lewis, and Lewis was a new member of ours, and I think because he was getting such strong readings that he thought it had to be more than one.
Okay.
And his way of describing it is collective spirits. Now, I don't believe in collective spirits. I believe you have a soul, I believe you have a spirit, and that's that. I don't believe you combine into one big soup. So actually Lewis and I had a little talk after I saw that.
Definitely piqued my interest.
Yeah, I said they're not collective spirits. There may be a lot of spirits there, Lewis, but they're not, a big blob of spirit, So
now, have you ever had any spirit or ghost or anything follow you home?
Yeah.
And was this like a 1 or 2 times? Is it kind of a byproduct of doing ghost hunting, so you'd have to learn how to deal with it, or?
Well, now I can't say that this one followed me home, but something appeared in my apartment, and it was there to give me a message. And people out there, take this for what you want. I don't lie, I don't make things up, and I'll tell you exactly what happened. I was writing a script, and in this script, it's a battle between good and evil. And there was a scene that I had written where a policeman gets captured by a bunch of demons. And there's 3 of the upper level demons watching. And they say, have your fun with him. So they throw him into the middle of the demons, and this one demon goes to get him, and the cop beats the bloody hell out of him. Right? And all the demons start hissing and stuff. And he goes, you two, get him. Well, The cop beats up both of them. Now, head demon is not very happy, so he sends his henchman to go get him. Well, the cop's kicking him and everything else, and the henchman's just standing there looking at him and grabs him and slams him on the ground and drags him across the head bad guy. Typical demon, red eyes, drool, the way I was writing it, and picks him up by the throat and is holding him out in front of him, looking at him. And the cop is very peaceful, right? And the demon looks over at him. You see the cop looking off to the side, and what he sees is a pile of bodies in the corner. And the demon says to him, he goes, "Why aren't you afraid of me?" And the guy just kind of nods his head and he goes, "I can already see how this ends." And the demon says, "Well, if you accept Satan as your Lord and Master, I'll save you." And the guy reaches in, he pulls out a cross, and he goes, "Sorry, I made my choice a long time ago." Well, the demon kills him, just like that, and throws him in the pile. About 2 a.m, I get up to go to get something to drink in the kitchen. And I'm walking through my living room by the dining room, and the whole thing is really, really dark. Now, I've lived here for 30 years, right? And I'm like, this is weird because it's got the same light from outside, the same vertical blinds and everything else. Kitchen's light, this is dark. So I'm standing there and I'm looking, and I have a cutout, where you can put the food from there into the dining room. And I can see the microwave with the clock on it. And I'm looking, and I see something start to stand up in the dark. Now, I think it's a burglar, right? So I'm like, right, bring it on. Let's go. Yeah, I've seen Karate Kid twice. I'm an expert. Come on, bring it, right? But anyway, I'm standing there and I'm watching, and I'm thinking maybe I'm just seeing things because of the difference because of the lights and the shadow and everything else. And then I see the head come up over the top of the cutout, and it's backlit. So I can't see the face or anything. I can just see the shape of a head. And then it goes up a little bit more, and the clock goes out. So there's something between me and the clock. And it goes up, and I can still see it's backlit, and it was so much bigger than me. It was ridiculous. So I knew what it was. I knew it was not one of the good guys. And, I was very scared. I'll be straight out honest with you. When you see something like that and you know what's there, you're like, what are you here for? Right? Was I a bad boy? So, but I stood my ground, and I looked at it, and I could feel, it's hard to explain, like waves of energy, and was I scared? Yeah, I was scared shitless, to be honest with you, right? And I stood my ground, and then the light switch was over here, so I went like that, and I jumped over and hit the light, and it was gone. Well, to finish the story, there were two twin girls that would come over to my apartment to use my equipment to try and communicate with their dad. They would use the spirit box. And anybody out there, the spirit box will say like one word a day. This thing started chattering one word after another when they were sitting there. And they're going on and going on. So I went into my bedroom, and I was on the computer and left them alone. And they're writing down all the words one after another, one after another. And I came out like a half an hour, 45 minutes later, and they're still writing. So I reached over and I turned off the box. I said, "Girls, what are you trying to do?" And they said, "Well, we want to contact our dad." So I hit it, and it says father and then his last name.
What? Oh,
and they write it down, and neither one of them reacted. So I hit the thing, and you can play back the last several. I said, "Girls, listen." And then they went, "Ah," right? So I said, "All right, I have to ask something. My turn." I had been seeing white shadows. I've never seen a white shadow before, and I'd been seeing white shadows streak through my apartment. And finally, I just said, "I got to ask something." I said, "What are these white shadows?" And the answer came back like lint or elbow or macaroni or something like that. It made no sense. And I said, "No, I really want to know what this is." And I swear on my mother's life, it said scent protection.
Oh, wow.
And what I was thinking, if the black shadows I had been seeing were the bad guy, maybe the white shadows are the good guys. And it said scent protection. And one of the girls goes, "Well, are you good or bad?" Right? And it came back and said, "Loving." And I was like, backup is here. So that night, and I'm outing myself a little bit. The girls were gone. I was walking out of my room, and I heard in my mind's ear, best way of saying it, "He's here." And I froze because I knew who he was. It was that big thing again, right? So I walked out in the living room, and I had enough, and I thought, okay, if I'm ever going to get it on with this thing, I got pals here today. So I went, "Bring it. Show yourself." right? Which you should never do. Don't do that, okay? You out there, if you're listening to me, do not do this. But I was emboldened. I thought I had help. It told me it was loving and sent protection. And I said, you show up or never come back to my place again. You're not welcome here. You know I have friends. Beat it. Don't come back. Have never seen a white shadow. Have never seen a black shadow again. And this place was so haunted. The stunt guy who lived next door to me had moved out because of the black shadows ripping through his place. He'd had a priest come over to bless his apartment. Didn't work. He had a little girl, and he said, I'm getting her out of here. So
Yeah, I can't blame him for that.
I can't either. But, strange things happen to me. And I tell people, and they go, oh, you're nuts. Okay, I'm nuts. It happened. I don't lie. Hook me up to the lie detector. I'll take the lie detector test. You can do what you want.
Well, obviously, the business that we're in with the tarot, people come and talk to us about things like this, especially if they have no outlet. And it's besides all the historical accounts, there's just too many stories of people that, and they only tell us, they don't tell the public. They just want to get it off their chest. They want to talk to someone. So it must mean we're all crazy then, or there's really something that is happening. I've had my own share of things, and especially when I think it's powerful when you're not looking for it, which is usually when it starts, is you're really not looking for it. You're just kind of living a life, and then something happens. And I think that, to me, there's enough stories and evidence, and I've seen things myself to know that something's going on.
Well, I have a saying that I've adopted, and I also say this at the paranormal conventions. I started getting evidence and more interaction when I stopped ghost hunting. When I went in and would say, hi, I'm Rick. Anybody here want to chat? Anybody want to talk? If you come up to this thing, this light will light up and know you're here. And we can communicate through that if you want to. Once I stopped going in there, like the hunter with the rifle and everything else, and went in respectfully, and things started happening.
That makes sense. You're more receptive to them. And even, I guess, the word hunting, you're right. It's like you're trying to track them down like an animal, or...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and you really want to have a rapport with them. And it's great that you actually just talk to them like you would a person.
Well, actually, I told somebody one time, they said, well, why don't you provoke? I said, well, let me ask you a question. We're going to assume that ghosts were people who have passed. And he goes, yeah. I said, if I come over to your house tomorrow and I start calling you a dirty, rotten, no good for nothing, you want me to stay? And he goes, no. I said, makes you think they want to talk to you if you go in there and talk to them like that? Mm-hmm. Right, so I'd been on the George Norrie show one time, and they played a tape of me interacting with this little girl, and somebody called in and said, you are the most polite ghost hunter we've ever heard. And I said, why wouldn't I be? I like to be polite to everybody. Why wouldn't I be polite to them?
That's your superpower.
Yeah, well, I told you my only superpower is people are really nice to me.
Yes, that and even the ghosts.
That's true.
But that has something to do with you. That's your superpower. But just the fact that you thought to do that. And I've sometimes thought also, I've seen some shows where they really talk down as if they're, can you hear me? And I said, I don't think I'd answer you, buddy.
Yeah. I had an epiphany of sort. A lot of people saw my group, me and Kane and R.A., on Ghost Adventures. And we were at the Pico House. Now, they had a huge race war at the Pico House between the Chinese Tong, the Irish, and the Mexican citizens. Now, back then, Pico, who was Mexican, was the governor of the area, right? Well, they had this big race war because the Chinese Tongs had killed the Irish cop on the beat, and the Irish and the Mexican people went after the Tong, and 19 people got killed in this big brawl right outside the Pico House. So I got invited by another group to go back, and R.A. and I went back. And I was down there with the K2 meter, and I was asking questions, and absolutely nothing was going on. Nothing. And then I had this epiphany, and I turned around and I said, does anybody here speak Spanish? And a girl says, I do. I said, do me a favor. After I ask the question, will you wait like 10 seconds and say it in Spanish? As soon as she started saying in Spanish, the K2 meter kept responding to her.
Wow.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, if they're Spanish,
right.
They probably spoke Spanish. They
right.
might have no idea what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
So I thought that was kind of an epiphany, and now I try to do that if it's any other place. I mean, to me, it's so funny when people go back to like Scandinavian countries, and says, well, come to the K2 meter. They're like, what is a K2 meter and what language are you talking? Whenever I go in, I always explain. First thing I'll say, guys, I want to communicate with you. What this is a meter, and it's got these lights on, and I go like this. They say, see, it won't hurt you, right? If you come close, it'll light up. And if it lights up, then I'll know you're here. And just by you stepping forward and back, we can communicate. So if you want to communicate, just come up close and have it light up, and then you and I can chat, right? And then sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I've been on hundreds, and I say this not lightly, hundreds of ghost hunts. Much more of them than not. Nothing happens. Much more. On the other hand, sometimes things happen that have nothing to do with the ghost hunting that are very satisfying. I had a guy call me, and I went out to see him, and he was a veteran, young guy, and he had PTSD. And he was telling me a story of how his neighbors kept yelling at him through the walls, and he was seeing things. So I went out there with Lewis, the collective spirit guy, who's actually a very good ghost hunter now. I mean, that was really one of his first hunts. He's very good now. We went out there together, and he's saying, do you hear that? Do you hear that? And Lewis is off with the meter upstairs going to different places. And I just looked at him. I said, no, Jesse, I don't hear it. Right? And that wasn't his name, Jesse. Forgot what his name was. But anyway, I said, no, I don't hear anything. Right? And I said, sit down. And he sits down. I said, are you taking meds for your PTSD? And he goes, yeah. And I said, look, I feel I owe it to you to tell you the truth. And he goes, no, please. Right? And I said, I think the idea of this place being haunted is the least likely answer. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, do yourself a favor, because I've heard this several times on different shows and things, of PTSD people getting stuff that interacts with each other and causes hallucinations and all kinds of side effects. I said, ask your doctor. Please just do that for me. Do that. I said, tonight when you were hearing things, I didn't hear a thing. So he calls me up like 6 weeks later and he goes, hey, dude, they changed my medicine. It's all gone.
Aww.
So sometimes you have to take the tough road. I mean, it's not the tough road. It was actually done out of kindness. But, I mean, you have to tell something they may not want to hear.
Right.
But he was a very cool guy, soldier, and he realized I was trying to help him. And it was nice of him to call me back. Said, it's gone. He said, doctor changed my medicine. I'm good.
Oh, you brought him some peace.
That was the idea.
Yeah. So what other kinds of equipment do you particularly like to use at this point?
Well, do you remember the pictures I showed you of the lady, Donna?
Yes.
This is really interesting. They have these things that you can put on your phone or your tablet, and it's FLIR. It stands for Forward-Looking Infrared. It's a thermal imager. You've seen it on the ghost hunting shows. Usually they have the self-contained one, but you can get one that I use on this phone, which I'm going to be using in a little while. I went to this lady's house, and she was a sweetheart of a lady. And I went there, and I went through her whole house, and there was not a blip of anything. I didn't feel anything. And finally I went down, and I said, Donna, I don't think your house is haunted. And she tells me, she goes, I don't think it is either. And I was like, huh? Yes, when you come in, what do you mean it's not haunted? And she goes, I think something's attached to me. Now, I was thinking to myself, and I've been around a long time. I know all the equipment and everything else. And I was like, how do I quantify that? I mean, I know the things, the symptoms and, how to recognize it, but how do I quantify that? So I thought, okay, all I can do here is make her feel more at ease. So I grabbed my K2 meter and I ran it up and down and I said, see, it's not going off. And I said, let me look at my night vision camera. And I looked at it with my night vision camera. And I said, look, there's nothing here. And then it dawned on me, I had this new piece of equipment, my FLIR. I said, try that. And I clicked on it and I went, holy crap. And there's the outline of her. And she's all orange and yellow and white. You've seen it. And right here, there is a dark purple spot, which is considerably colder, 20, 25 degrees colder probably, which is the feeling that you get when you start to get attached. You get this ice cold feeling, because I've had it happen to me and it's terrifying.
We are running out of time. This is a great story.
I'll finish up. I told her to scare it off, tell her it couldn't sit there. She went all religious fervor on it. I took another picture and it was gone.
I saw it. It was an amazing picture. It was. And I think that's a good story to leave everyone on. And we are really happy you came on. I could have spent another hour talking to you. You have a lot of stories, and it's really interesting. And we look forward to your book.
Yeah, it's and I also have a magazine. It's hghmag.com. It's all about ghost hunting and you know, things like that. And it's free online. So if you don't like it, you don't get your money back.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us, and thank you all for watching us. And if you like us, thumbs up, please. Even if you don't, you know, we want to know the truth. And leave your comments and go to our website, www.sixthsensesociety.com, to see upcoming shows. And have a great week. Good night.
Good night.